Anything to keep the peace. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. James Gunn's Suicide Squad film is on its way and will be hitting theaters and HBO Max's streaming service this summer. And we know you are all as excited to meet the new squads perhaps, as we are. So we wanted to make sure you are ready to go when the film releases when it comes to all the important factoids on some of the most anticipated characters, like John Cena's Peacemaker, who will also be getting his own series on HBO Max. So they say. Join me as we count down the top 10 Peacemaker facts you need to know, and get ready to fight for peace. Alright, let's get counting. Number 10, his name. Peacemaker fights to keep the peace. There are people who share a similar name, known as peacekeepers, who operate all over the world, being sent to nations to basically help negotiate for peace and maintain it during times of conflict. I actually was once a pen pal with a peacekeeper in Canada when I was a kid. I'm not joking about that, that's a real thing that happened to me. However, while the meaning behind his name seems rudimentary, Peacemaker makes the peace, did you also know that Peacemaker is the name of a gun? The Colt Single Action Army is a revolver, sometimes referred to as a Model P or a Peacemaker. True facts. This type of gun was in service during the late 1800s, way before Peacemaker existed, but then it is possible, though unlikely, that the name of this gun could have inspired the name for the character, because it predates the character. Still, either way, I just thought it was cool. Cool facts. Number 9, CHARLTON Comics. Peacemaker was originally a character created by CHARLTON Comics, which DC would of course later acquire. For those not familiar, back in the 1930s and 1940s, the comic industry basically saw a huge boom where comic book publishers across the United States started popping up everywhere. In fact, this was like the boom that created comics. This was mostly due to the major success of heroes that DC wound up publishing, such as Superman and Batman. CHARLTON Comics was one such publisher that popped up around this exciting time in comic book history, starting up in 1945 under the name TWO2 Charles Company, named after the co-founders Ed Levi's and John Santangelo Sr.'s two sons. Both had sons named Charles, you get it? The publisher went defunct in 1986 and was known during its time in the industry for its unique approach to having every part of publishing done in-house, from editing to printing. It was also known for being one of the cheapest comics around, both in practices and in consumer cost. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about cool Suicide Squad members, let us know in the comments below and show us you love it by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, initial appearance. What we know of Peacemaker and his motivations now actually contradicts what kind of character he was originally from his Charleston days. In Fightin' 5, issue 40, where the first incarnation of Christopher Smith originally appeared, he was a diplomat and a genius inventor who only became Peacemaker when there was no other option left. His motto there was more like, sometimes you have to fight violence with violence, but ideally, don't do that when you can. This version of Christopher Smith still had his trusty helm, but it wasn't as steeped in his own guilt and turmoil as we'd see later on, and was just a piece of equipment. In fact, later on in his own series from Charleston, The Peacemaker from 1967, in issue 4, he would reveal that his reason for becoming Peacemaker and fighting the good fight was simply because man is civilized, governed by law, but unfortunately there are madmen who will not obey those laws and will not submit to the sanity of diplomacy. The Peacemaker is an action buffer between these madmen and global war. So he was really only around as a hero as a buffer or as a last resort when villains wouldn't listen to diplomacy. But mostly he preferred diplomacy to violence. Like I said, that would change later on. Number 7, Vigilante. Christopher Smith would get a revamp on his character when he came to DC and appeared in their series, Vigilante. There he would be much more similar to the Peacemaker that we have come to know today in comics. A ruthless anti-hero and sometimes villain who is on a mission to achieve peace, whatever the cost. His appearances in Vigilante set him up as a far more violent character, who also was much more unhinged. He appeared in DC's Vigilante series from the 80s, from issue 36 to 38, and then issues 41 to 43, and finally in that final issue, issue 50, before he got his own miniseries, where the character would be reworked again to be more like a cross between the Charleston version of the character and DC's version. Less unhinged, more stable, and more of a diplomat, but still violent and more haunted confronted by his mistakes. Number 6. Hippocratic motivation. Peacemaker has come a long way and in the modern day can sometimes be depicted as one of the most violent and extreme characters out there. Peacemaker Christopher Smith is still an agent of peace, but his methods aren't usually non-lethal anymore because while he still very much believes in peace, he believes in it so much that he's willing to get his hands dirty. In other words, Smith believes that killing just about anyone that needs killing is necessary in order to achieve peace. So his whole motivation as a hero is kind of contradictory. Peace usually means an end to violence, where we don't fight with one another, but we simply strive to get along. This is what living peacefully is about: harmony, nonviolence, coexistence, understanding. And yet when people refuse to accept peace, Peacemaker is willing to go all non-peace on them and go all violent on whoever stands in the way of his mission, to bring peace to all, to fight for peace. How can you fight for peace when it's anti-peaceful? Killed the president. All in the name of peace, though. Of course. And also because the president actually asked him to assassinate him. Fun fact. In the multiversity Pax Americana story, Chris Smith is a government hero who works with and for President Harley. Part of Harley's plan to ensure world peace was to be assassinated by Peacemaker and later brought back to life by Captain Atom. Peacemaker follows through with his mission and shoots down the president from suborbital levels. After being captured and questioned for the murder, Peacemaker claims he had done it all for peace. Pax Americana is a pretty neat story as it not only features DC's acquired Charleston comic characters, but also ties in DC's Watchmen characters as well. Also, it just is a cool story and looks cool. I believe it's Frank Quitely and Grant Morrison. Pax Americana, it should be noted, is set in the world of Earth 4, so this version of Chris actually exists outside of the main continuity. Alternate Chris Smith. Number 4, his father's death. One of the most traumatic experiences in Christopher's life happened when he was just a little boy. Initially, Christopher and his family had lived in Austria, and his father was Wolfgang Schmidt. Schmidt was Christopher's original last name before he moved to America with his mother following his father's death, and then they changed their name from Schmidt to Smith, which was a common thing when people moved around back in the day. His mother was Elizabeth Lewis, an American author. Wolfgang had fought in World War II on the side of Germany, and after the war, due to his involvement, was considered a war criminal for all of the awful things that he'd done. Unable to live with this, Wolfgang took his own life, and Christopher witnessed his father doing so, which left him traumatized at the tender age of 5, and would cause him to believe he saw his father's ghost periodically throughout his life. Number 3, his trusty helm. In James Gunn's Suicide Squad trailer, we hear Bloodsport mock Peacemaker's toilet-looking helmet, I think he calls it. But although it might look ridiculous, that helmet actually is a huge part of his character and serves a much greater purpose. While wearing his helmet, Peacemaker hears the spirits of those who were killed by his family's fortune. His helmet serves to connect him to those who died because of his and his father's actions in 2 different wars and military services. His father worked on the side of the Axis, and more specifically Germany, during World War II, and even ran a camp himself. And Peacemaker, Christopher, served in the US military and was held responsible for massacring a whole village filled with civilians while abroad. The souls can be seen in a way as offering guidance, but more often serve to kind of haunt Peacemaker and remind him of why he fights for peace and why it's so important, sort of representing his guilt. As I said earlier, Peacemaker also hears the voice of his father and sometimes sees his ghost, who generally encourages him towards violence and encourages him to work hard and sort of earn his legacy. Hearing voices and believing that spirits or souls are trapped in his helmet often makes Peacemaker seem, well, kind of crazy. In fact, while he believes that these souls reside within his helmet, others are more inclined to believe that Peacemaker is actually suffering from schizophrenia. Number 2, gadgets and weapons. There is another reason Peacemaker wears his helmet as well. It's also a weapon. In fact, this is probably more logically why it was part of his outfit. Although, as I said, Peacemaker does still believe that souls reside within it, Peacemaker's helmet can be used in a fight to fire sonic blasts at his enemies, stunning them temporarily. And I think originally his helmet was actually like a laser. He also comes equipped with a bulletproof outfit and a jetpack. Number 1. Multiple Peacemakers. Christopher Smith, the version of Peacemaker we've spent much of this list talking about, isn't the only Peacemaker out there. Christopher Smith was the original, and his creation was credited to Joe Gill and Pat Boyett, although obviously he's changed a lot over the years. He deals with the shame of his family and later the guilt of his own actions, which prompts him to fight so hard, even going so far as to kill, all in the name of peace. At least in DC. And so we have kind of Charleston Comics Christopher Smith, and then we have New Earth Christopher Smith, and then rebooted Christopher Smith from the Prime Earth, which are all really one version. Then there was the brief appearance of the new Peacemaker in Justice League International, who was part of the League Busters Peacemaker 2. Following that, we had Mitchell Black as Peacemaker, who was formerly a surgeon before turning to a life of vigilante heroics, recruited by the Peacemaker Project to become the head of their enforcement division. This version of Peacemakers were used to help resolve conflicts around the globe, being sent out to whatever nation had the most need of them. So kind of closer to like what peacekeepers are, but like heroes? So they were still violent? Whereas peacekeepers aren't usually violent. I don't think they're violent at all, actually. I don't know. If you're a peacekeeper and you're violent, though, let me know in the comments, because I only pen palled with one peacekeeper. What is your favorite version of the Peacemaker? What do you find so intriguing about this character? How long have you been a fan? Or is Peacemaker new to you? Let us know in the comments below. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host, Amanda McKnight, reminding you, as always, to stay safe and stay nerdy, YouTube.